This is the HKCGI Corporate Governance Quality Qualifying Program Examination Technique Workshop, Section 1A. Section 1A, Part 1. You can make reference to Chapter 2 of the study material. The link between the risk management and corporate governance. Risk management work together with corporate governance. Actually, risk management is a cornerstone of corporate governance. It is a very important part of the corporate governance. Therefore, when we wish to upgrade or maintain the high standard of corporate governance, we need to deal with the risk management. Okay, because it can maintain, it is an obligation and duties of the directors to maintain an effective risk management system, and so that it can maintain the high standard of corporate governance of the company, either a profit company, profit making company, or NGO. Okay, and then corporate governance is a system and related process by which an organization is directed and controlled. Is the Cadbury's report definition, and it is also up to the expectation of the stakeholders for companies to maintain a high standard corporate governance, and also the company, when they set up the strategic objectives, of course they do have to take into account the corporate governance as well as the risk management in their strategic objectives, because they want to the companies to be sustainable, and also value added, improve the value of the company or their investment, and then therefore risk management then support these activities. Risk may affect the companies adversely, destroying their value, and therefore risk management is critical for the organizations to continue as a going concern, to help the companies to avoid any serious fraud, as well as the failure in the compliance management. And and also it's important for the reputation of an organization. For example, for the compliance management, if the companies fail to comply with the compliance management, then it is if they fail to comply with the compliance, it is a very serious problem and consequence for the reputation. And therefore, in terms of a CSR as well as sustainability, they need to maintain a risk management, effective risk management. But the issue is that a good governance can effectively manage the risk, but it never eliminate the risk. It cannot eliminate totally the risk. It can control and manage the risk or reduce the risk, but that they cannot remove all the risk, and they can never be completely eliminated. Okay. Okay, but the risk management, but the risk of the companies can be affected by the environment, external environment as well as internal environment. For external environment, for example, a political issue, war, and then investment environment, market, and the license issue, and then a social issue, And for internal environment, for example, the change of the board of directors, the change of policy and procedures, and then the financial situations of the company, and also change of internal auditors. Okay. How risk management link with corporate governance? Okay, the good governance should also ensure the long-term sustainability, and therefore, risk management may have a negative effect on the sustainability of the company because it can destroy value. It can cause serious consequences to the company. Therefore, the long-term sustainability will be very important, and therefore risk management will be effective risk management is very important for the long-term sustainability of the company. Okay, and then importance of a risk management, a stakeholders approach. Okay, the company's ordinance in Hong Kong is a shareholders approach, right? Because under the law, under the law is the shareholders approach in Hong Kong. There is no specific role under the law or under the company's ordinance to refer to the stakeholders. What are the stakeholders? What are the stakeholders? Okay, this is the diagram from a study materials. Stakeholders is a concept very confusing because there are various stakeholders. Shareholders can be a stakeholders. The employees can be a stakeholders. Regulators, creditors, the general public, the community, customers, raising agency, suppliers, consultants. They are the stakeholders. There is a lot of stakeholders, and the question is, who are the stakeholders? This is a very broad and unclear concept. Okay, and then how to distinguish between the shareholders and the stakeholders? The shareholders are protected by the law, right? Under the law, that the shareholders has the right to share, to receive the dividends, and then casting their votes in the shareholders meeting, and also in case the company is winding up, the shareholders can distribute and share the remaining value, the residual value of the company, right? And then the shareholders can vote in the shareholders meeting under the company's law, right? And then the law, the company's ordinance also specifies that the authority of management the companies is vested to the authority of the management is vested to the board of directors. Okay, but how to distinguish the shareholders and the stakeholders? There is no specific law to protect the stakeholders. Okay, but we can distinguish the shareholders and the stakeholders by the ownership. Of course, the shareholders is the owner of the company. Where is the stakeholders? They are not deemed as the owner of the company, but they are deemed as the legitimate right holders. That is, they have the legitimate right. That means for example, for the suppliers, they have the legitimate right by under the contract, the supplier's contract, right? And then the customers, they have the legitimate interest under the customer contract. And then the employees, they have the legitimate interest or the legitimate rights as long as they have the valid employment contract. Okay, as the employers. Of course, the regulators, they have the interest because they are the regulators under the law. They regulate the industry, and also they monitor the governance of the company under the company ordinance. The creditors, of course, they have the loan, right? The loan agreement. They have the legitimate interest. Okay. Therefore, that we can distinguish between the shareholders and stakeholders. Why is it stakeholders approach from the risk management perspective? Why? The risk management is a very broad system in the companies. It has the enterprise-wide. It is not a very narrow one. It is a very broad concept for the risk management. Okay, and therefore, also under the principles of corporate governance, or the corporate governance principle of the OECD, G20, OECD. One of the principle, right? Principle 4 is the stakeholders concept. Okay, therefore, under the OECD corporate governance principle, it is a stakeholder concept, and therefore it is a trend that is stakeholders and risk failure. Every part of the also the stakeholders relationship with the companies is also a risky situations. For example, the default of the customer, the default of the supplies of the supply chain is a risk situation. The default of the customer, failure to pay the service or the product is a risk failure. Okay, and also regulators failure to comply with comply with the certain obligations for the company is a failure. Therefore, risk failure, the risk management is the stakeholders approach. What are the difficulties for stakeholders approach? The problem for stakeholders approach is that because there is very unclear concept, the stakeholders' interests may be conflicting with each other, and also the stakeholders' interests may be conflicting with the shareholders' interest. Therefore, it is difficult to manage the stakeholders' interests because they are conflicting. However, the risk management can help to reconcile the conflict of interest between the stakeholders as well as the shareholders. Okay, I think we have covered this. A brief history of UK corporate governance regulations. I think the starting point from a corporate governance, it's required under the syllabus. Okay, the brief history of UK corporate governance regulations, the corporate governance code, is starting from 1992, the Capri report, and then the first definition of corporate governance is based on the Capri report. Okay. And then the Capri report also developed a set of principles for good corporate governance, which were incorporated in the London Stock Exchange listing rules. That is the so-called governance codes, comply or explain. That is, it is not up to the listing rules standard, but it comes out with the so-called comply or explain. That is, you need to comply with this. Failure to conform with this, you need to explain. As long as you provide the explanation in the listing, in the annual report, then it is okay. That no serious consequence. But if you fail to disclose this non-conformance in the annual report, then it is a breach of the listing rules. Okay, that is the comply or explain. Okay, typical example in Hong Kong for this. is the Appendix 14 listing rules in Hong Kong. It is part of the listing rule, but the requirement of the Appendix 14 is not listing rules. It is just a comply or effect. Explain. That is a corporate governance code provision. And then it covers two parts, Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is the mandatory requirement for disclosure. Failure to disclose these mandatory requirements for disclosure is a breach of the listing rules. Okay, then it will be a serious consequence for the listed companies directors, as well as the listed companies. And then the second part is the principles of good corporate governance, the code provision on a comply or explain basis. That is, you need to conform to this and that. Failure to conform to this, you need to explain with well-considered explanation and reasoning in the corporate governance report of the annual report. Otherwise, failure to disclose to this or give explanation will be a breach of the listing rules. Okay, that is the so-called comply or explain. As long as you give the explanation, then it is okay. And then and then we come to a recommended best practice. It is not a code provision. You are recommended to do it, but listed companies fail to do it or refuse to do it. There is no consequence. Appendix 40, Part 1, Part 2, comply or explanation. I think we have covered this. Okay. G20 OECD principles of corporate governance. A total of 6 principles, right? Mainly for listed companies, and it also emphasizes stakeholders' approach, and then identify the principles for the governments of the jurisdiction, and also talking about the shareholders protection, and then financial institutions behavior and conduct, and also stakeholders approach, and then and also directors obligations and duties. Okay. Objectives of the OECD, of course, maintaining the good corporate governance. The principle 4, the role of stakeholders. As I have mentioned, this is the stakeholders approach, all right? The role of stakeholders in corporate governance. The corporate governance framework should recognize the right of stakeholders established by law and through the mutual agreement, and encourage the active cooperation between the corporation and stakeholders in creating well job and the sustainability of the financially sound enterprise. The sub-principles to recognize the lawful rights of stakeholders to obtain effectiveness and redress for violation, to allow employee participation, to assess relevant, sufficient, and reliable information in a timely and required and regular manners, whistleblowing protection, and effective enforcement of creditors' rights. Principle 4, the role of stakeholders, and then the principle 6, the responsibility of the board. The corporate governance framework should ensure the strategic guidance for the companies to effective monitoring of the management of the board's accountability to a company and the shareholders. Okay, and it talks about the principle 6 talks about the responsibility and duties of the board of directors, and then one of the sub principles, principle 6, review and monitor the risk management and integrity of the financial report. Review the risk and monitor the risk management and integrity. Okay. Okay. If you are interested in the G20 OECD principle of corporate governance, you can download this from the OECD website without charge. It's free of charge, and I think the latest version is 2015. You can try to get it, and if there is a latest version, you can get it. The 6 principles. The first one is the jurisdiction. The government is obligated to set up the corporate governance regulations to improve and maintain the high standard of corporate governance of the listed companies. Okay, that is the first principle. The second principle is the shareholders protection, especially for the shareholders rights must be recognized by the management team, and also the management and the board of directors should provide the minority shareholders protection. And then the third one is the conduct, talking about the conduct of the financial institutions, and also the recognize of their rights as a financial institution in the investment in a listed company. And then the fourth one is the responsibility. The fourth one is the role of stakeholders. Okay, recognize the lawful rights of the stakeholders, the effective redress for the violation, employee participation, etc. And then the fifth one is a transparency and the disclosure of the company. Okay, the timely disclosure of the company for to avoid the asymmetric information issue and the insider dealing. And then the sixth principle is the responsibility of the board. Okay, including the review and monitoring of risk management and integrity of the financial report. Okay, I think monitoring and controlling risk. Okay, risk control in USA, the UK governance codes deal with in Part C. Sarbanes-Oxley Act. After the Enron case, the U.S. government the Parliament enacted the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. The key point is to improve board effectiveness. Come up with the requirement of the Code of Business Ethical Conduct for directors and senior officers. Strengthen audit committee, expertise in accounting, independence, internal control system, Section 404, which is one of the key points. A lot of U.S. Hong Kong company listed in the New York Stock Exchange delisted because of the Section 404 is so tightened. According to the Section 404, the listed companies, the CEO and the CFO has to come up with confirmation that the internal control system remain effective, and that confirmation has to be acknowledged, not acknowledged, attestation by the external auditor of the company. Okay, that is therefore the compliance cost, compliance maintaining cost for listing in the USA would be very high, and therefore a lot of the listed companies delisted and deregistration from New York Stock Exchange as well as SEC and returned to Hong Kong. And then PCAOB is to oversee the external auditors' conduct. Remember, for the Enron case, actually it's the Arthur Andersen's, the external auditors, because has the management and consultation service contract, and in addition to the auditing service, and because of the management and consultation service contract, can even have a higher size of the service cost, service fees as compared with the audit fees. Therefore, the Arthur Andersen's becomes significantly influenced by the management team member of Enron, and therefore the auditing work becomes distorted and affected by and influenced by the management team. And because of this, And because of the destroying of the evidence, Arthur Andersen was subject to a very severe punishment. And later on, Arthur Andersen was dissolved. Mandatory best practice. Okay, internal control procedure structure. Audit committee requirement, independent, and then the whistleblowing protection. UK code. Okay, UK is a corporate governance codes, and for UK, you can download these information from in the FRC website for the corporate governance code and standard from UK. At the very beginning, the Appendix 14 actually is a copy of the UK codes. Risk management practice and problem. In many cases, risk was not managed on an enterprise basis, and therefore, for effective risk management, they always emphasize that the risk management must be well integrated with the management system, and also it must be enterprise-wide implemented. Okay, and then the risk management manager will often separated from the management. Risk management doing their job alone, but the risk management system must be well integrated with the existing management system. They should not be working in parallel. They must be integrated together. And then the risk management, in some cases, lacks status to enforce policy. Therefore, the risk management must be led by the chief executive or one of the VP at such level. Okay, and so that it can be have a top-down approach and also well supported by the board of directors. Boards were in a number of cases ignorant of the risk. They do not understand the risk management, the concept, and also the identification of risk facing the company. The company has to maintain the risk register and identifying the principal risk as well as emerging risk. Excessive focus on a regulatory capital ratio for a Basel I capital requirement instead of the risk factor, external factor, and internal factor. Risk management failed in too many instances in financial companies. Okay, problem identified. Risk can be in many forms and classifications. It is very complicated one, interrelated, and complex. And then risk for financial sectors, such as strategic risk, marketing risk, reputational risk, compliance risk, operational risk, and credit risk. Risk for non-financial, strategic, market, operational, financial, business, technical, project risk, operational risk. Executive risk executive have duty to manage risk from corporate governance perspective to protect shareholders' interests. Okay, this is the end of part 1 of section 1B. About the second part, as I mentioned, I have to cover 5 PowerPoint, and then the first one is mainly for the background introduction, background and introduction of and also the regulatory linkage for the corporate governance and the risk management, and also and then for the second PowerPoint and the third PowerPoint and the fourth PowerPoint really for the Hong Kong supplement, because in examinations, what you are required to answer the question is based on Hong Kong situations instead of the UK or USA. Okay, and therefore the following part is the Hong Kong supplement to help you to prepare for your examination. And then the last PowerPoint will be for ISO 31000. Okay, and that is the main task of the risk management learning. Okay, and then this is the second PowerPoint, part 2.1, and then you will have the part 2, and then the part 3, and then the part 4. The second one, study material and the Hong Kong supplement. is also relating to chapter 3 of the study material. Okay, but the regulatory framework in the study material will be in for Europe, for UK, etc. And then what we are talking about is the Hong Kong supplement. But it is a very large one, total of 86. Therefore, I just highlight those key points. And then you can access this PowerPoint from HKCGI. The first part is Hong Kong Financial Regulatory Frameworks. That is the sectorial framework, especially the 3-tier system. Financial Secretary, and then the sectorial regulatory agency, for example, SFC, Securities and Futures Commission, or the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Okay, these are the second tier. And then the third tier is the self-regulatory organizations, for example, the Hong Kong Bank Association, the Insurance Association, and also Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Okay, common risks for the bank and banking. Okay, we have the so-called the compliant risk because as a financial institution or the listed companies, that you have to comply with certain rules and regulations, not the laws, the rules, and also the codes, etc. Okay, that failing to comply with these, that will be of course there will be the serious consequences. And then there is the license failure, and we have to the banks or the financial institution has to answer to or accountable to the SFC, to the monetary authority, and then ultimately is the financial secretary in Hong Kong. Okay, another typical example, typical situation is the anti-money laundering or the counter financial terrorist risk. Okay, it's also very people in Hong Kong complain about the difficulties to open the bank account, and then the detailed requirement for those banking procedures of financial institutions in their procedures, as well as for the accountants, for the auditors, as well as the company secretaries, the compliance executives. Okay, they all look into the AML CFT. They have to know your clients, the KYC. Okay, because it becomes a very tough requirement. And then one of the financial institutions or the bank difficulties is the cyber security risk, and therefore they set up a lot of rules and regulations and also procedures in order to prevent any fraud, cyber security fraud. Technology risk, competitions, and then technology requirement, and the reputation risk. Okay, of course, failure to comply with certain compliance requirement will result in reputations risk, and also CSR, that is corporate social responsibility, and operation risk, liquidity risk for the banks. Remember the case, the security firm, the security, the bank appointed a security firm to transport tens of billions of bank notes, and then the security firm the failure to safely transfer the money, and that is the operational risk. And then liquidity risk, when the bank become bankrupt, that is the liquidity risk issue. To adopt up to standard risk management system and the compliance system, to comply with all relevant laws, regulations, codes, internal and external. This is the compliance risk, to handle with the compliance risk. And then to tighten the internal control procedures, whistleblowing policy, compliance and ethical culture, and then appoint enough or sufficient compliance officers and internal auditors, and then to have a director's support and then enough resources for the system. Okay, insurance authority. Okay, I think we will not have enough time to go into detail. But insurance authorities, you can go to internet, the insurance authority, to understand the relevant rules and regulations as well as the codes. The insurers have to confirm the compliance requirements, whether they are the fit and proper persons, management and shareholders, adequate insurance arrangement, adequate assets maintained in Hong Kong for general business, prudent valuation basis for assets and liabilities. Okay. Of course, typical compliance requirements for corporate governance for those insurers, risk management, okay, whistleblowing, training, stakeholders and investors communications. And then it comes to the third one, Securities and Futures Commissions, 證監會. The setting up of the Securities and Futures Commissions derives its investigative and remedial disciplinary powers under the so-called Securities and Futures Ordinance, 證券及期貨條例, Chapter 571 SFO. Okay, SFC is the 證券及期貨證監會. SFC is a 證監會, and also SFO, the 證券及期貨條例. Okay, Chapter 571. You must bear this in mind. And if you work in the listed companies, for a compliance officer or a compliance executive or the company secretaries or the corporate governance, your internal control, internal audit, etc., you must understand 571, the requirements, the compliance requirement. Operationally independent and government of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region is funded, maintained mainly by transaction levies and licensing fees. Okay, it is very interesting. It is not really government subvented. It is an independent body separated from the government, right? But and it has funding from the transactions. That is the market provide the funding for these regulators, but the regulators monitor and control the market. As a financial regulators in the international center, financial center, the SFC, strike the string and potent and protect the integrity of the soundness of the Hong Kong. Okay, remember the G20, OECD 2015, right? The first principle, corporate governance principle, that the government of the region has the duty to set up the appropriate market and regulations for the setting up of the for the corporate governance requirement. Okay, for example, the transparency for the regulations for control, so as to establish the so-called orderly market, a transparent market, and efficient market. Okay, orderly, transparent, and efficient. Usually the appropriate terms for these. The market means the stock exchange. Okay. The function of SFC, I will not go into detail for this. You can go through this. Regulatory objectives to help for profit, to maintain the competitive. The key point here is to develop and maintain competitive, efficient, fair, orderly, transparent securities and future market. That is to maintain the competitive, efficient. That means the information is disclosed and disseminate in a within very short period of time, in a very efficient manner, in an effective manner. It is a fair market, and it is an orderly market. It is a transparent market. Okay. Oh, the key point, the first bullet point is. The second one is to help the public understand the working. Of course, there is a public education. And then for the protection of the investing public, to protect the public investor, not to be cheated by the insider dealing, not to be cheated by those fraudulent listed companies. For example, China Metal Recycling, 中金國際, okay, actually is the fraudulent company to cheat the investing profit, to minimize the crime and misconduct in the market. Okay, it will come to this. To reduce systemic risk, and the government maintain Hong Kong's financial stability. Broker, investment advisor, okay, and the license activities. This is a long list. Dealing in securities, dealing in future contracts, and then advising on securities, advising on the future contracts, advising on the corporate finance. Okay. Setting licensing standard, approve the license, monitor licensees, the activities of the licensees, the trading, 證券 brokers. Okay, then from time to time, the regulators, SFC being the regulators, will look into any frauds, and then even they have the operations to arrest those fraudulence, like for example, London Gum, and then the 證券內幕交易, okay, insider dealing. Okay, and then regulating the listed companies by the SFC is a dual filing system. What is the meaning of dual filing system? That is, for the applications to apply to be listed in Hong Kong, they have to submit the files, the application files, and then also the listing documents, both to the stock exchange as well as the SFC, right at the very beginning. Okay, and then upon the completion and then listed in Hong Kong, and then any further informations submitted, filed by the listed companies will both submitted to the stock exchange and then copy to SFC. That means for whatever documents received by the stock exchange will be copied to SFC within a certain time period, certain period of time, and that is the so-called dual filing. That means that the SFC can always access to all the informations, each piece of information in the stock exchange. In case the SFC can intervene the market. Typical example is the stock exchange once allows a listed companies to come back to the stock exchange to resume resumes the trading of the shares of the company, but the SFC may not allow it, and then exercise its power and suspend the trading of the listed companies under the law SFC. Okay, the so-called the Section 8 第8條 of the listed securities and future listing rules. Okay, under the SFC. Okay, the Section 8 and the suspend trading, and that is the stock exchange, of course, can exercise its power under the so-called listing agreement between the listed companies and the stock exchange. However, the SFC actually can suspend trading under the SFC, under the law, under the SFO. Okay, they have the power to suspend trading from time to time, and therefore, if they do not agree the arrangement or the handling handling of the stock exchange, they can intervene from immediately. Okay, that is the so-called securities and future stock market listing rules. It actually is not really the listing rule of the stock exchange. They are really the securities and future stock market listing rules under the law. Okay, it is equivalent to law. This is actually the sub law, and then the so-called Section 8 suspension of trading. Therefore, you have to make yourself familiar with this when you come to work under the listing rules. And then Section 6, SFC is empowered to object to a listing applications for IPO or post-IPO. And that is for Section 6, they can reject any applications of IPO. And then even they have approved the IPO, they can suspend trading. And then even after the IPO. And then delisting of a listed companies from exchange, Section 9, okay? Oversight on stock exchange. Stock exchange itself is a listed companies. They have the profit pleasure, and therefore there may be role conflict, and therefore as a stock exchange, SFC has the duty and responsibility to oversight the stock exchange. How to regulate the market participants, including the investors, monitor the unusual market movement, and direct suspension of trading. As I mentioned, Section 8, okay? China High Precision, 中國高精密, okay? That is an example I've given a few minutes ago. Stock exchange allow the resumption of share trading of China High Precision, okay? And then the stock exchange disagree with this arrangement. After the resumption, within 6 days, the SFC exercised the Section 8 suspend trading of the China High Precision. The dispute is relating to whether the companies come up with audited stock exchange, qualified, unqualified annual report or qualified annual report. Okay, and then stock exchange released the standard, but which was not agreed by the SFC. Energy is another situation that the SFC exercises the power that directors under the Section 214 of the SFO, that the directors has to be step down and distant from the management of the company. Okay, and then GME is suspended trading after the listing. As I mentioned, that is the so-called Section 6. Investigate the take actions against the market misconduct and other breach of the law. Gokmei and Gokmei Electrical Appliance, Greencool, and then China Metal Recycling, 中金國際, Greencool is 做假帳, okay? Fabricate financial reports. Gokmei, insider dealing. Not really insider dealing. Yeah, Gokmei case, the 中國首富, right? And his wife, Do Good, right? And then the directors approved the repurchase of shares in the market, but actually we purchased the shares from the controlling shareholders, Wang Gongyu. Okay, monitor the licensee for any malpractice or violation of law and regulations, and Moody. Okay, Moody red flag report, short selling agency report. Securities. And then six market misconduct, civil route, and then part 13, part 14, part 15, and part 16, part 14A. These are the important points for you to understand the listed companies compliance requirement. Part 13, 6 market misconduct. Part 14, 6 market misconduct. But part 13 is for the civil route, and then part 14 is for criminal route, 民事同刑事 Okay, and then part 15 is disclosure of interest. Directors are required to disclose their interest, whereas for the principal shareholders, the controlling shareholders, or the substantial shareholders has to disclose their interest. Okay. when they are up to 5%. Okay, and then within 2 working days or 3 working days, and then when there's further transaction, they have to also file further disclosure. That is under Part 15. And then Part 14A will be disclosure of inside informations. That we will discuss this together with insider dealing. Okay, anti-money laundering, codes and guidelines. That is apart from law. They also issue certain codes. Typical example is the share repurchase and acquisition, merger and acquisitions and share repurchase codes, or the codes for share codes for merger and acquisition and share repurchase. And then there are other various type of guidelines, and failing to conform with these codes and guidelines may have may result in consequence. Okay, takeover and mergers, share buybacks. Okay, guidelines, enforcement. Okay, under Section 179, that is, they have the strong authority to demand information from any persons relating to listed companies. And then SFC can also demand any person from intermediaries, that is the share traders, the share brokers, the broking firm, the share trading firm. They under the Section 181 of the SFO. That means they can demand the intermediaries to provide information to SFC. And for what purpose? The FCC, when they are interested to, they're keen to investigate insider dealing. Okay, what you trading with your shares, you have to go through the intermediaries, right? The share trading firm, and then they demand the trading firm to provide the information. Who are the traders? And then they can look into the insider dealing. Compelling production. Okay. Deal system market misconduct. I've mentioned about the 6 types of market misconduct. Insider dealing is the first one. Section 270 and Section 291, norm of 交易, and then false trading, price fixing, disclosure of information about the prohibition transaction, 276 and 297, and then disclosure of false and misleading information, including the transaction, 披露虛假具誤導性資料以誘使進行交易. Within the meaning of Section 277 and 298, that is the section under the section for CITIC case 中信泰富炒輸呢個accumulator. Okay, that is the Section 277. Stock market manipulation 操控股票. What is the reason why the dual root system? Under Part 13, under the civil root, is the market misconduct tribunal, 不當行為市場不當行為審裁處. Okay, and then Part 14 is under the criminal root, while the court 就法院啦法庭. Therefore, for the Part 13, it is the 6 types of market misconduct will be under the civil root is the market misconduct tribunal. This is handled by the tribunal, right? But even but under the market misconduct tribunal, but it is up to the standard in the procedure, as well as if it were in the court. 雖然佢嘅程序都係非常之嚴謹嘅，very tight procedure, have very high standard of procedure requirement. And then Part 14 is under the criminal root. Of course, it is the court. Okay, it depends on the evidence. If they have enough evidence, they will go through the court procedure. If they have not so strong evidence, but they can still consider that is the case, more than probable to be confirmed or upheld, then they will go through the civil route. Okay, the line between the legitimate conduct and the market misconduct is not so clearly distinguishable. And then the market misconduct is often concerned with the fraudulent intent or guilty mind. Okay, guilty minded. But it's difficult to prove. And Whether the conduct is legitimate or not very much depends on the intention of the person entering into carrying out of the act. And intention is often difficult to identify or establish in court. The court sometimes infer, mens rea is the Latin, from the fact of the case, infer the intention, the guilty mind. Okay, due system, but no double jeopardy. Okay, once they go through the civil route, they will not go through the criminal route anymore, or vice versa. Once they go through the criminal route, if they fail, they will not come back to the civil route. Okay. For those civil route, they will handle it by market misconduct tribunal, and they will present the case by the SFC himself, and then if it is a criminal route, then for those summary judgment and the magistrate, they will handle by SFC. But whereas it is a high court case, indictable judgment, they will come by the Secretary of Justice, by 律政司啦。Okay. And also there's a lot of cases under the section 213. 213 is the freestanding of the freeze the asset of the wrongdoer. 呢個凍結令called to freeze the asset. They under the so-called section 213. Very typical example. 道君 Morgan Stanley was required to pay 23.9 million. The asset is freeze. And then target asset case, also Bill Song Kun, Raymond Clark, and then 郭美, Wang Gongyu and Do Good, to pay 420 million to the court. Context Hong Leong Guokzai to be delisted and refund approximately 900 million to investor because of the fraud in the listing application situations in the due diligence. They try to provide the bribery payments to the auditors. Okay, this is section 213 is the 凍結令, freezing the asset. And then 212 is the winding up procedure under the company's winding up and miscellaneous provision ordinance, chapter 32. Formerly is the Companies Act, but now it becomes the company's winding up and miscellaneous provision under section 212. Here it is winding up the company. Typical example: China Metal Recycling, 中金國際. Okay, the High Court to wind up the company. And 214 is for disqualify the director from the listed companies. Typical example: Energy for Film, 漢能薄膜. Okay. Insider dealing. Okay. 內幕交易 and the disclosure of inside information. 披露內幕信息 starting from April 2003, April 1st, 2003, starting from they criminalize, they call it criminalize, 刑事化 insider information, insider dealing. In the past, before the enactment of the Securities and Futures Ordinance, insider dealing is just a civil case, civil route, civil case, and then going through the market misconduct tribunal. And after the enactment of the SFO, starting from the 1st April 2003, insider dealing can be a criminal offense, as I have explained, double route, right? And 6 types of market misconduct. Therefore, for each type of market misconduct, there are the civil route and then the criminal route. Section 270, for example, for insider dealing is for civil route, and then 291 is for criminal route. Okay. Definition of insider dealing in law: occurrence of insider dealing, a connected person. Okay, we will define it. We will handle the definition later on. A connected person, 關聯人士, either deals or procures another to deal or disclose relevant information, doing or having reasonable cause to believe that the recipient will deal. 一個關聯人士，上市公司嘅關聯人士，自己進行交易及 促使他人披露相關嘅信息，而意識到佢所接受信息嘅人士將會進行相關嘅交易。OK， 咁即係話咧，that means a connected person either deals or procures another to deal or disclose relevant information, and then knowingly that the person who receives this relevant information will be trading. Okay, will be dealing with the shares. Okay, that is but then what the key question is what is connected person and what is relevant information. We will come to this definition. A connected person is a person, substantial shareholders, directors, okay, and employees, and whatever they have the chance to possess the inside information. Okay, and what is relevant information? Relevant information is the inside information. Okay, and then the second bullet point, the first one is to handle the insider, the relevant information, the connected person of the listed companies. 任何人士其實就係任何人士 in the listed companies who can access to the irrelevant information or the inside information, and then he deal with the shares or procure other person by giving the information tips, or the tipper, the tips, provide the information to the person knowingly that he will also deal with the shares. And then the second bullet point is the person who is contemplating a takeover, 進行 the financial advisor, for example, and then contemplating and deal with the procure another person to deal with the, of course, a financial advisor or the auditors who handle the takeover or deal with the procure another person to deal with the shares. And that means who had the inside information for the acquisition or the takeover, and then who deal with the shares, 進行買賣啦, and then who provide the information to another person knowingly that he will deal with the shares too. Okay, that means the second bullet point is for the advisor, for the auditors, or financial advisor who have the information for inside information for the merger and acquisition, and then deal with the shares or procure other persons to deal with the shares. And then the third one, a person who has received the relevant information, receiver, the TP, who received the information, inside information from the connected persons, and who is contemplated a takeover or either deals with counsel and procure another person to deal. That means a person who received the inside information and then deal with the shares or procure other persons to deal with the shares. Okay, relevant information is specific information. Of course, it is a specific information of the relating to the company, the shareholders of the officers or the listed securities. Okay, these specific informations, for example, the oil prices of oil companies. Okay, that is a specific information. It's not generally known in the market. Okay, of course, sectors of the market. Of course, if it is generally known, then it's not inside information. Because it is inside information, that means it's not generally known in the market. To the person who are accustomed or would be likely to deal in the listed securities of the company, but which would, if it was generally known to them, be likely to materially affect the price. That means this specific information relating to the companies or the shareholders of the listed companies is not generally known, but once it is known by the sectors of the investor, it will materially have the effect on the share price. That means it is the price-sensitive information. In the past, we usually call the price-sensitive information, PSI. It is the inside information, very specific, relating to the company. It's not generally known in the market, but once it is known and disclosed, it will have the material effect on the share price. Okay? But nowadays, we call it the inside information. Relevant information, continue. Specific, not generally known. Some example, of course, change in the control, merger and acquisition, change in the directors, change in the auditors. There should be something wrong. takeover and mergers, restructuring, reorganization, legal dispute, procedure. Okay, of course, it is not an exhaustive list. There is no absolute definitions. Connected persons. Who are the connected persons? Under the listing rules, there is also the connected persons, but under the SFO, under the section 247, the directors, the employees, substantial shareholders, person who may reasonably be expected to have access to relevant information by reasons of the professional or business relationship with the listed company. Okay, there may be the suppliers or the customers. Okay, and therefore any person who have the reasonable chance to access the inside information. Dealing in means to sales. First referral to M&T, no double jeopardy. Disclosure of our obligations under the Part 14A, Part 14A or SFO. In the previous PowerPoint, we talked about the insider dealing, insider trading. It can be either civil route under Market Misconduct Tribunal or the criminal route under the court. Right now, disclosure of obligations under the Part 14A is another type of the law. It concerns about the disclosure of inside information by removing the inside information from the listed companies, and so as to reduce the chance of insider dealing. And what is it talking about? Starting from 2013, 1st January, the listed companies has the responsibility or the duty to disclose inside information as soon as reasonably practicable after the inside information has come to its knowledge, unless it can take advantage of one of the prescribed safe harbor. That means listed companies, the directors, the officers has the duty to disclose inside information once they have aware of this. They are aware of these inside information. They have to disclose this inside information as soon as reasonably practicable, unless they can make use of the safe harbor. What are the safe harbor? Okay, what is the meaning of reasonably practicable? And then these are the questions. Inside information, same definition as the insider dealing. Okay, and then unlike the insider dealing, there is no criminal route. It is only civil route because it is at the Part 14A. Okay, only the civil route, but they share the same definition of inside information requirement. Okay. Okay. Who has the duty to disclose information? The corporation. That is the listed companies, the shareholders or officer of the corporation. Of course, the directors and they are aware of it. And then the listed securities of the corporation or the derivatives. And this not generally known. Okay, that is the definition. The share the same definition of inside information. Disclosure obligations. And as I'm talking about this, once they are aware of these inside informations, they have received this, they heard about this, then they have the duty to disclose this as soon as reasonably practicable. Then what is the reasonably practicable? That is, they have a little period of time to check, to confirm the information, to check with the directors for the disclosure, and then they have very short period of time to consult their legal advisor, and then they go through the procedure, but the very short period of time, within a few days. In the market practice, usually it is within a very short period of time, and then there are the typical case that well, the listed companies receive warning letter when they fail to disclose the inside information within 5 working days. Okay, therefore, the listed company has to take very care for the soonest disclosure of inside information. Okay, what are the safe harbor? To where they have disclosed. That means the listed companies can disclose the information on the stock exchange. If they have disclosed the information in the stock exchange website, and that have already fulfilled their obligation. Okay. Who are the officers? Of course, the directors, manager, security, or any other persons. Reasonably practicable, I think we have talked about this. Means of disclosure, stock exchange. Safe harbor. Okay. Disclosure is prohibited by the law, of course, safe harbor. And then the information concerns or incomplete proposal of negotiation. These may be disputable. When we are talking about, we are negotiating. We have not completed our negotiation. However, you have the obligations if there is a rumor in the market. That means there is a leakage in the market. And then you have to provide the transitional information or intermediate disclosure. You need to come up with an intermediate disclosure, and then complete the information disclosure later on when the negotiation is completed. And then the information is a trade secret. This may be an excuse, but you must emphasize this at the very beginning for your during your negotiation. That is, you have to sign the non-disclosure agreement, the non-disclosure agreement or NDO, and NDA. Okay, and then emphasizing that what we are talking about the trade secret. You cannot found to be under the fault of the non-disclosure in a timely manner, and then find an excuse as being a trade secret. Okay, the SFC will check into every step of the procedure and the past record. Okay, the information is concerned the provision of liquidity support to the companies from exchange fund. Okay. If a company breaches the statutory disclosure requirement, each of the officers of the company could potentially be subject to civil sanction. Okay, only the civil route. And then it is subject to a fine of 8 million Hong Kong dollars in maximum. And then going through the market misconduct tribunal. And apart from this fine of 8 million Hong Kong dollars, there may be other civil route punishment. For example, disqualification of the directors of the officer for up to 5 years, cold shoulder, and then cease and desist, disciplinary referral, for example, professional bodies, lawyers or accountants, right? There's the insider dealing case. Insider dealing case for 2 lawyers. For 2 lawyers case. But we don't have time to discuss this further. Court order. Listing rules. Relating listing rule, Chapter 13, substantive 9, and then Appendix 10. But if it is mainly under the law, then the law will be the key points instead of the listing rules. Okay, but Appendix 10 is the model code. That is the directors has to come up with conform with the standard that they will not disclose. They will not sell the shares once they have received the information, inside information. That is they have to conform with the standard, such a standard. Directors of listed companies are under the duty to ensure that the employee of the company who are likely to be in possession of unpublished inside information. That is the Appendix 10. Key points in practice: keep the project strictly confidential. Need to know basis. Be careful. And then always give precautionary note. Right at the very beginning, they have to sign the NDA, and then emphasizing this is a trade secret, and then all the documents must be registered, and each recipient must be well registered. Reminding them regularly. Avoid meeting with security analysts if you are in possession of inside information or during the blackout period. Blackout period is a US term. It is not really Hong Kong term. If it is impossible to keep confidential, request for suspension of trading. That means suspension of trading voluntarily, and then suspension of trading until the disclosure of the press announcement. Always promptly disclose or refrain from trading. Always comply with internal procedure and comply with SFO, listing rules and takeover codes. And you are invited by SFC to provide information. Such requests must be kept confidential. And disclose inside information as soon as practicable for transparency. Okay. And we have talked about the insider dealing and also disclosure of obligations for listing rules for listed companies. The first one is Part 13, and then Part 14 for Chapter 571, and then Part 14A, Section 307. First, for insider dealing is for civil and criminal, and then for the disclosure obligations is under the civil route only. And then for the accused, for insider dealing, is only the natural person can do the insider dealing, right? Only the natural person. Substantial shareholders, right? The directors, the financial advisor, right? But the company and or other natural persons can involve in the disclosure obligations problem. That means that listed companies may be fined with a sum of money, 8 million Hong Kong dollars in maximum, or each directors can be subject to fine. And then who? Insiders. Who are the insiders? All employees or connected persons or agents. Whereas for the disclosure obligations, only those authority, directors, compliance officers, not all the employees. Okay, because for secretaries, they have no authority to make the decision to disclose information. Okay, whereas for only the directors has the right to disclose information, whether to disclose in timely manner or not. Prosecutor, okay, heard by market misconduct tribunal, punishment, etc. Okay, in the Part 1, and then Part 2. Continue. Stock exchange. We need to be faster. Hong Kong Stock Exchange is a organization structure. It is also a very typical one under Section 21 of the SFO. Hong Kong Stock Exchange has a statutory duty to ensure, as far as reasonably practicable, an orderly, informed, and fair market for the trading of securities listed on the exchange for the public interest. The Section 21 is very, very, very typical. And then the duty for the stock exchange is to maintain the orderly, informed, and fair market. Now, orderly 有序、資訊透明同埋公平。Okay. Under the supervision of the principal regulators of Hong Kong, of course, it is a SFC, 證券及期貨監察委員會、證監會。Problem of restriction of stock exchange, IPO quality problem, China high precision decision making, wrong decision, one share, one vote, debate, Alibaba. Another problem is the listing rule is not I think this one is a potential conflict of interest. Stock exchange itself is a commercial enterprise. Of course, they also want to be profitable and then to be strong in Hong Kong or in Asia, and then number one in IPO. But nowadays, IPO is the 10th, right? Even worse than the Indonesian market. And then stock exchange, potential conflict of interest. Okay, they always try to increase the market cap, and then but the quality of the IPO become poor. Listing rule is another problem. Is that listing rule is not a statute. It is not a law. It is the listed companies conform with the listing rules is under the listing agreement. That is just an agreement between the listed companies and the stock exchange. Okay, and therefore the consequence is limited. Lack of deterrent effect. Lack of deterrent effect. And then of course its advantage is it is more flexible. It is not a law. They can change within short period of time. However, it is lack of deterrent effect. It is just a principle based. Content is not precise as law. High tendency to become box ticking attitude. Okay, the change. SFC always intervene, becomes up to the front bench instead of a back bench. In the past, stock exchange is the front. It comes in the front as the front bench, whereas SFC is the back bench. But nowadays, there is no difference. A series of action taken by SFC. Okay, by suspension of trading, Section 8, suspension of dealing. Okay. Common compliance risk for listed companies in Hong Kong. Compliance risk. What is compliance risk? There is a standard ISO standard 37301. That is a standard issue published in 2021. Okay. It defines the compliance risk, the likelihood of occurrence and the consequence of non-compliance with the organization of compliance obligation. And then we require that the organization mandatory has to comply with, or as well as those that an organization voluntarily chooses to comply with. Okay, and then the definition of compliance, meeting all the organization's compliance obligations, and then non-compliance. There is the definitions for the compliance risk. Compliance obligations generally arise from laws. Example, compliance obligations. Chapter 622 Inland Revenue Ordinance, Inland Revenue, Securities and Future Ordinance, and then rules and guidelines. Example, Securities and Future Stock Exchange Listing Rules of SFC. The codes for on takeover and merger and shares buybacks, and then license. Telecom operators, broadcasting service providers, listing rules abide by listed companies. Agreement between the stock exchange and the listed companies. Okay, there is a lot of the rules and regulations we need to comply, and failure to comply with these obligations will have the serious consequence. For example, censures by the regulators, and then the directors has a duty, and then maybe claimed by the there is the litigation risk, and also claimed by the minority shareholders, and also there is the financial problem for if it is under the litigation, making provisions, and also there is a reputation problem, the reputation risk, and also the sustainability risk, and it is a social responsibility problem, disasters. Social pressure, agreement between the stock exchange and the listed companies. Listing rules abide by the listed companies. etc. Typical consequences of non-compliance by the stock exchange: public censures, public statement with criticism, private reprimands, internal control review, warning or caution letter for enforcement, mandatory training, retention of compliance advisor, and then worst scenario to be delisted, and criminal offense referral. Consequence of non-compliance: there are 4 primary consequences of market misconduct under SFO: civil punishment, criminal punishment, orders that may be imposed under Part 10, Division 2 of the SFO, regulatory sanction, more severe punishment, civil route, and then tort. Companies directors. If you have taken the company or corporation law, then you may already have the in a strong position to understand the fiduciary duty of the company's directors. Okay. I think we can skip this. Okay, this one. Directors' duties for listed companies. In the listing rules, chapter 3, 3.08, main board, 3.08. It is a list. You are encouraged to you are advised to go through this. Keep this director's duty. It is a very good summary. The board of directors of an issuer is collectively responsible for its management and operations. The exchange expects the directors both collectively and individually to fulfill fiduciary duties and duties of skill, care, and diligence to a standard at least commensurate with the standard established by the Hong Kong law. Okay, and then come up with 6 ABCDEF 6 duties. Okay, and come out, if we boil down these chapter 3.08 listing rules, directors' duty for a board of directors is collectively and individually liable to the duty. And then what are the duties? We come up with the two basic one, the fiduciary duties and the duty of skill, care, and diligence. Duty of skill, care, and diligence is for they have to fulfill their duty in a diligent manner, and then of course they should not involve in a conflict of interest. Therefore, for the fiduciary duty is mainly for the conflict of interest, and then the duty of skill, care, and diligence is mainly for duty of care and diligence. And then what are they? Be more specifically for ABCDEF, 6 types. And then the sixth one is apply such degree of skill, care, and diligence. And whereas for A and to E is for basically is for fiduciary duties. And therefore, when you are come to examinations, you have to think about these two: director's duty, fiduciary duties, and the duty of skill, care, and diligence. And then they are collectively and individually liable. Okay. And then every director of a listed issuers must satisfy the exchange that he has the character, experience, and integrity, and is able to demonstrate a standard of competence. CEI, character, experience, and integrity. CEI, remember these 3 terms. CEI. Independent of non-executive directors. There are 3 types of directors for listed companies: the executive directors, the non-executive directors, and the independent non-executive directors. The independent non-executive directors are supposed to represent the interests of the public investors, the minority shareholders. Okay, therefore they are independent. Then the listing rule 3.10 is talking about at least 3 independent non-executive directors, and at least one of them must have appropriate professional qualifications or accounting or related financial management expertise. Must appoint independent non-executive represent at least 1/3 of the board. Okay. And then he has a character, integrity, independent, and experience. Remember, CEI, right? C, character, E, experience, I, integrity, and independent. CEII. Okay. I think apart from the listing rules, is also you must also aware of this notifiable transaction. Apart from the insider dealing, Chapter 14 is talking about the disclosure. Disclosure. What is a transaction? What are this notifiable transaction? And then this is Chapter 14. Various type of transaction, and then you have to disclose it, and then going through the procedure. Okay. Compliance requirement. This is also the compliance risk for listed companies. For listed companies, they have to go through certain transaction, but if they go through this kind of transaction, they have to disclose it in a timely manner. Therefore, we call it notifiable transaction. Okay, what are they? When they involve in certain transaction, if it is under ordinary transaction, they can exempt. However, it depends on the size and also the nature. They have to disclose these kind of informations accordingly. Therefore, we call it a share transaction or disclosable transaction, a major transaction, a very substantial disposal, or very substantial acquisition, or the reverse takeover, etc. If the transactions fall into this type of transaction, they have to disclose it in an ordinary manner, in a timely manner. And whereas for those ordinary and usual course of business, then they can exempt this kind of disclosure. Okay, how to determine this? There are the so-called 5 ratio tests, and they based on these calculations, and then come up with these various types of transaction. According to this, the ratio test, they have to disclose this, fall into different type of categories, and then make the disclosure accordingly. Okay, if they come up with this disclosable transaction or major transaction or very substantial transaction, they have to go through the press announcement, and then shareholders approval, and then as well as dissemination of the circulars and within certain period of time, and then holding of the shareholders approval accordingly. Okay, that is the so-called compliance requirement. Okay, and if necessary, the listed company has to suspend trading, suspend the dealing of the shares until they have finished the procedure, for example, disclosure of the press announcement, and then apply for the resumption of trading. Shareholders approval for major transaction. Of course, from time to time, the directors has to avoid conflict of interest. For very substantial acquisition or disposal, they have to go through the major transaction one, and also they must be made conditional on approval of the shareholders in general meeting. No written shareholders approval will be accepted. And whereas for the reverse takeover, it's supposed to be a new listing application. Connected transaction, 关联交易. Basically, it's based on the notifiable transaction, but addition, that is a transaction between a connected person with a listed company. And then subject to the shareholders' approval if the size is large. And then there is no exemption for the under the ordinary and usual course of business. All transactions, both no matter it's a capital in nature or revenue in nature, they have to subject to approval. No exception as that in the notifiable transaction. Definition of connected person. A connected person is a director, a person or a chief executive or substantial shareholders. And under the definition of the listing rule, a substantial shareholder is a 10% holder of the shares. A person who has a director or the listed issuer, that is the listed company or any of its subsidiary in the last 12 months. And then for PLC, is a supervisor. And then associate of any of those above persons. Okay. The diagram showing the connected person. Definition of an association of a connected person. Association is a very, very vague, a very broad definition. You can see the diagram. A very broad concept. And then deemed connected persons. Even though it's that the stock exchange has the authority to deem any person that is associated with a connected person as the deemed connected person. For a continuing basis, for connected transaction on a continuing basis, it is subject to a continuing connected transaction approval. What are the compliance requirements? Okay. Of course, if the size of the transaction is so small, then it can be exempted. The exemption by de minimis. Okay. I think we have to stop here for this PowerPoint. We have to come to another one. Supplement 2. Here we talk about what is the relationship between internal control and risk management. Of course, internal control and risk management are working together. Internal control can help to reduce risk. And also under the causal concept, the internal control system, risk management, risk assessment is a part of the internal control. Okay, therefore they are working together. Internal control can help manage risk. And all companies have inherent risk, and should manage and control risk by effective internal control system and risk management system. Therefore, if we implement internal control system effectively, plus the risk management, then we can significantly reduce the inherent risk. Leaving behind is, of course, the residual risk. Therefore, when the auditor comes to audit the company, whether they accept the auditing work, they will look into whether the company has an effective internal control and risk management. If they consider that they have the listed company has the internal control system effectively and also the risk management effectively, then they will consider that the residual risk will be, their audit risk will be less, and then they can charge the reasonable audit fee. Conversely, if they consider that the company does not really have effective internal control system or risk management system, they will consider the residual risk will be very high, and then the audit risk will be very high. Then they will charge. They will consider not to do the accept the audit work, or otherwise they will charge a premium audit fees in order to to match their audit risk. Okay, impossible to totally remove the risk. Company performs control at a critical point where risks are high, risk-based approach. Okay, that means here this point is that they consider that it's difficult to totally remove the risk. And then the listed companies, when they come up with the internal control system, they will focus on, they will come up with the risk-based approach. That is, they will focus on those high-risk area in order to allocate their resources. Okay, and then therefore they regularly they will perform the risk assessment, and assess the risk, determines the high-risk area. Risk assessment is the identification and analysis of the risk to the achievement of business objective. It forms a basis for determining how risk should be managed. We call the causal system. The risk assessment is one of the 5 key components of the internal control system. Okay, a very typical one, causal system. The risk assessment is at the second level. The first, they need to consider determines the control environment, and then they will conduct a risk assessment, and then set up the control activities, and then the informations and communications for the dissemination of informations, and then for monitoring and activities. And if they come back with after their monitoring activities and then identify any problem, they will review the control environment and also review the risk assessment. And this can be applicable for the whole enterprise or individual project. The problem is the box ticking, failure to comply with prioritized key point, resource limitations, and not really supported by the top management. Responsibility and problem. Under the Appendix 14, this is important for you. You have to go through this, download this Appendix 14, Section D2, Risk Management and Internal Control. Because for the listed companies, the regulatory base for the risk management and internal control is based on this Section D2, Appendix 14. Okay, that is a part of the listing rule. This is extracted from the listing rules. You have to understand what are the principles the board is responsible for evaluating and determining the nature and extent of the risk it is willing to take in achieving the issuer's strategic objectives. Okay, the board has to understand the nature and extent of the risk it is willing to take. Okay, and then ensuring that the issuers establish and maintain the appropriate and effective risk management and internal control system. The risk management internal control system. The listed companies establish and maintain the appropriate and effective risk management. The board should also oversee the management in the design, implementation, and monitoring of the risk management and internal control system. The board should oversee, okay, and maintain. Management should provide confirmations to the board on the effectiveness of this system on a regular basis, at least once every year. Okay, that is the responsibility for the board to determine the nature and extent of the risk. That is the risk appetite. To what extent they can tolerate the risk, and then the strategic objectives of the companies has taken into account the risk management and the internal control system. Ensure to establish and maintain the appropriate and effective risk management and internal control system, and then ensure the management teamwork any management team to design and implement and monitor the risk management and internal control system. And finally, confirm the effectiveness of the system on a regular basis, at least once every year. And for D21, the board should oversee the listed company's risk management internal control system. That is repeating the principles. because of based on the principles, they have to come up with the detailed work. This is a code provision. This is a code provision, as I have explained. For the code provision, D21 is a code provision. That means that is comply or explain. That is, if they have failed to comply with this requirement, they have to give a well-considered reason and explanation. Okay, and on an ongoing basis, ensure that a review of the effectiveness of the issuers and its subsidiaries, risk management, and internal control system has been conducted at least annually, and report to the shareholders that it has done so in the corporate governance report. That means they have to set up the risk management and internal control system on an ongoing basis and maintain the effectiveness of the system. Okay, and then they have to conduct the review once every year, at least annually, and report to the shareholders, at least annually, and report to the shareholders. And then such a review should cover all material controls, including the financial operations and compliance control. That is the point for D21. And then D22, the board's annual review should include particularly ensure the adequacy of the resources, the staff qualifications and experience training program, and the budget of the issuers accounting, internal audit, and financial reporting. That is the scope. And then 2.3, the board annually review the board's annual reviews of the internal control system as well as the risk management system, particularly consider the changes, any changes that may result in significant risk, and the listed company's ability to respond to change of this business. For example, any political risk, the technical risk. Significant control failure, any significant control failure, the extent of frequency communications, the quality of the management's ongoing monitoring of the risk, the effectiveness of the issuer's process for financial reporting. 2.4, should disclose CG report and the review result, as well as the methodology has to be disclosed in the corporate governance report. And the issuer should have an internal audit function. 2.5, the internal audit function is very important to identify the fault, the failure in the internal control system, as well as the risk management, as well as receive the complaint from a whistleblowing. And 2.6, the issuer should establish a whistleblowing policy and system for employees and those who deal with the issuers, customers, and suppliers to raise concern. And 2.7, the issuer should establish policy and system that promote and support anti-corruption laws and regulations. We will go through this anti-corruption law. 2.8, recommended best practice may disclose the corporate governance report that it has received a confirmation from management on the effectiveness of the issuer's risk management and internal control system. Audit committee. Principles, the board should establish formal and transparent arrangement to consider how it will apply financial report, risk management, and internal control principles. Okay. Code provision, D3. Audit committee, the oversight the issuer's financial reporting system, risk management, and internal control system. It is the audit committee to oversee the listed companies, the financial reporting system, risk management, and internal control system. Where the board disagree with the audit committee's view on the selection, it has to be fully disclosed. And any situations of appointment, resignation, and dismissal of external auditors. And the audit committee should be provided with sufficient resources. Okay, and then D3.7. D3.7 is talking about the whistleblowing. To review the arrangement of the employees of the issuers can use in confidence to raise concern about the possibility improprieties in financial reporting, internal control, and other matters. Okay, D3.7 actually is talking about the whistleblowings. To review the arrangement. What is the arrangement? Whistleblowing protection policy. Okay, that is relating to the employees. Employees of the listed companies can make use of the arrangement and then to raise their concern in confidence and talking about the possible improprieties in financial reporting, internal control, and other matters. Okay, that is, what is the arrangement? That is the whistleblowing protection policy, and this will be discussed in D3.8. Okay, Audit Committee, Schedule 5, a description of the principal risks and uncertainties facing the companies. That is the company's ordinance. Director's duty. Roles and duties of a company secretaries or compliance executive: to advise and support the directors, to arrange training to directors and employees, to organize the training, to arrange, to act as the secretary of the audit committees and support the independent non-executive directors, to liaise with the independent directors, to oversee internal audit, to oversee internal control and risk management, whistleblowing policies and complaint handling procedures, to arrange periodical review, and then to act as an advisor, immediate advisor of the board and the chairman. Liaise external professional support, investor relations, disclosure of corporate governance report, and also liaise with the regulators. That is to liaise with the SFC and the stock exchange, and then the lawyers, auditors, etc. Whistleblowing. Whistleblowing means the sounding of an alarm. That is the disclosure or the raise the concern and complaint to internally to the appropriate persons internally as well as the regulators externally. In relations to the concern about the financial reporting and also financial reporting and also the practice and or the operations. Okay. Whistleblowing and risk and the relationship of whistleblowing and risk management, they are working together. Whistleblowing can help to reduce the risk, at least the corruption risk as well as compliance risk, the fraud risk. Okay, and therefore risk management work together with the whistleblowing. And then therefore whistleblowing can help the financial reporting reliability, avoid earning manipulation, avoid insider dealing, avoid false market, etc., as well as the bribery and corruptive practice. Okay. Okay. D3.7, Appendix 14. 2.6 here. The listing rules code provision, which is a code provision, provided that the audit committee should establish a whistleblowing policy and system for employees and those who deal with the issuers to raise concern in confidence with the audit committee about the possible improprieties in any matters relating to the issuers. Therefore, in the past, it is actually the 3.7 and 3.8, formerly 3.8. They are in the past they are the recommended best practice, but nowadays it becomes a D3.7 is a code provision. That is to review the arrangement to employees that whether there is what is the arrangement actually is the whistleblowing policy. That is the employees can have the chance to raise their concern in confidence about the possible improprieties in financial reporting, internal control, and other matters. Okay, and then 2.6 is audit committee should establish the whistleblowing policy and system for employees, for them to raise their concern. Okay, and then the key point for whistleblowing policy is that the policy is to protect the whistleblower. How to protect the whistleblower? That means when they come to for example the audit committee to raise their concern to whistleblow, then they should be protected. That is, the whistleblower should be protected from being retaliated from those accused persons. Okay, if they raise the concern and then being ill-treated by the accused person, then nobody will dare to raise the concern. Okay, therefore in USA there is a clear whistleblowing protection policy law that in the event of any ill treatment by those accused person, it is a violation of the whistleblowing policy, then it may becomes a criminal offense. Okay, but it is not. There is no statutory back in Hong Kong. It is only the listing rules, a code provision D 3.7 and D 2.6. D 2.6 is to establish the whistleblowing policy, and then 3.7 actually is the regular review, whether it is an effective one. Okay. Difficulties. Of course, it is difficult. It is not statutory back in Hong Kong. Okay. And then in Hong Kong, it is also requires the anti ABAC, or the anti-bribery or corruption and corruption risk and risk management. The key point is the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, Chapter 201, Section 9. Okay, any person without the approval should not receive any benefit from third party or outsider, because it is an infringe of the fiduciary duties of the officer, of the agent. Because even the employee, of course, the directors has a very heavy duty, because remember, for the directors' duties, there are two main types: the fiduciary duty and the duty of skill, care, and diligence. And whereas for the employees, even the employee, they have the fiduciary duty too, and they do not involve themselves in a conflict of interest. Otherwise, they will subject to the consequence of the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. Okay. Typical example, Sun Hung Kai case, and even in the company's ordinance, section 542. Okay, the company director has to declare their interest if they are involved in certain interests in the transaction of the company. And then for the case law on the secret gain of company's directors, Bond against Fields, and the Bristol and Western Building Society against Moorfield. They are very famous court case. And then on statutory duties of company's directors, under the company's registry issue a guide on the director's duties in March 2014. There are the principles, 11 principles. Okay, principle 5, 6, 7, 9. Listing rules. D27, Appendix 14, issuers should establish policies and systems that promote and support anti-corruption law and regulations. corruption. Okay, corruption risk. Inductive organization culture, how to manage corruption risk. Inducive organizations culture, persistent compliance practice, effective internal control and risk management, code of ethical business conduct, whistleblowing policy, training and education, communications and practice with shareholders, roles and duties of company secretary and compliance executive. Reference, okay, and then anti-money laundering and the risk management. Basically, is the law relating to anti-money laundering. The definition: money laundering. 3 stage. These are a lot of anti-money laundering law. Common ways of launder money. Government duty. Government has a duty to fight against anti-AML CFT, preventive measure, law enforcement, and anti-terrorist, corruption, and international cooperation. Compliance risk and corporate governance of these companies under AML CFT. Compliance risk. A lot of of course, these companies are likely required to conform to one or other laws and regulations or license guidelines on AML CFT. The directors of the listed companies has the duty of skill, care, and diligence to follow, to conform with these requirements. This is the so-called compliance risk. And then the corporate social responsibility for as a listed companies or those big companies, they have the corporate social responsibility to follow the AML CFT, not to involve in any terrorist practice. And then the legal risk and reputation risk, and then a financial stress. Okay. Townsend Young, typical case. Okay. In Hong Kong, and in UK, there's an AML CFT case in Hong Kong. 5 main pieces of legislations in Hong Kong about the anti-money laundering. SFC, they also have the guidelines in Hong Kong. 證監會、金管局、HKMA. Okay. Even HKCGI also have the guideline. And then this is for corporate governance and risk management in public sector and NGO. I think we can skip this. Okay. And then the final one is workshop 1A, part 4. Risk management framework is relating to the chapter 4 of the study material. It's mainly for ISO 31000 2018. You must make sure that you understand the risk management framework and under this ISO standard. Okay, it's likely to come out in examination, at least 1 or 2 questions or whatever. Therefore, you need to understand what is it. Okay. The principles of effective risk management outlined by ISO 31000 provides a guidance on the characteristic of effective and efficient risk management, communicating its value and explaining its intention and purpose. The purpose of risk management is to the creation of protection of value, creation and protection of value, and then improve the performance of the company, encourage innovation and support of achievement of objectives. Of course, it is the purpose of it. And then the risk management means under the ISO as defined by ISO standard means coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk. There are basically two main body of standard for risk management. The first one is ISO International Standard 31000 2018. It is actually incorporated from Australian standard and internationally recognized, well supported with other additional supplementary standard. Another type is the COSO system, mainly for US companies. Of course, it is a dual listing, both in Hong Kong and Stock Exchange and New York Stock Exchange. Then, of course, you need to conform with a COSO system too. But in Hong Kong, the listing rule does not specifically mention what kind of standard that the listed companies has to follow. And therefore, it is up to the listed companies to adopt a specific system. And for HKCGI, we introduced both ISO standard as well as COSO in the syllabus. Therefore, candidates has to understand both systems. And then in the examination, you can just adopt one. You can make use of ISO standard or COSO system to answer your question, unless it is specifically mentioned that you need to answer the question in ISO standard. Okay, and then the principles of the effective management system outline that is the characteristic of effective and efficient risk management, communicating its value and explaining its intention and purpose. The principles are the foundation of managing risk and should be considered when establishing the organization's risk management framework and process. What is it? Okay, for this diagram, it shows clearly that is the framework, the basic framework of ISO standard 31000. In the first one is the principle. The framework is based on the principles. What are these principles? The value creation, protection, integration, etc. We will come to this. And then it comes to the framework. And then it comes to the process. First, with principles, that is the macro, the upper level. And then the framework, how to come into detail. And then how can it work out? And then finally, how is it in detail in the operations? Okay, what are the process for it? And therefore, you are recommended to download this to download this ISO 31000. I'm not sure whether it has to be charged or not. And you are recommended to download these documents, the ISO standard, for reference. Okay, principles are value creation and protection, and it talks about integrated, structure and comprehensive, customized, inclusive, dynamic, best available information, human and culture factors, and then continuing improvement. Value creation. Okay, integrated. Of course, the risk management has to be integrated well with the companies, and then as a part of all organized activities. Integration is the key point for successful application, and success of the whole ISO risk management. If it is separately conducted, then it is meaningless. Okay, and then structure and comprehensive. It is well structured, step by step, and comprehensive. It is very detailed and then a well approach. Okay, instead of a piecemeal approach, and then it customized, and it must have to be well designed and implemented according to the need of the company. Okay, there is therefore there is no universal applications. It has to be fit into your company. Therefore, it's customized. inclusive. It is timely involve stakeholders, enables their knowledge, views, and the perception to be considered. Dynamic, of course, has to be developed in a timely manner, and then be flexible and up to date, and then best available informations. Okay, of course, it has to be updated, and then fit into the development of the company. Human and cultural factors. It has to be. It is a human behavior and culture, and therefore a risk management culture is also a very successful factors for the applications of risk management. And then continual improvement. It has to be updated, regularly monitor, and then revise, and then monitor again implementation. The ultimate principle is the value creation and protection. Value creation, that means it can help the companies to compete. It has to becomes the competitive edge of the company, because it have to be taken in a strategic objective consideration. Okay, therefore it can help to value creation, and then for the protection, that means it can reduce, it can control the risk, and then to avoid any liquidity problem, and then a financial risk, and then it can help to protect the company from reputation risk, sustainability, etc. Okay, that is for protection, value creation and protection. And then the framework. What is the framework? Leadership and commitment. Of course, it requires the leaders, directors to support top management, from top to bottom, and then integration, ensure the integration of the company, the design and implementation. Leadership and commitment. Integration. It has to be integrated with your existing management system, computer system, management system, and so that it can it has to be a effective system. Design. The systems, there is no universal system. It has to be designed to fit into the environment and the culture of the company, and then it has to fit into up to the risk appetite, the tolerance level of the company. Implementation. The framework. Evaluation. Of course, it is not too sure whether the design and the structure is fit into your requirement, into the company's strategic requirement. Improvement. How to improve it on a continuous basis. And then finally is the process component. It is also it will come to this lecture in the later session, and it talks about the communications and consultation, and then the scope, context, and criteria. That is the borderline. What is the boundary line of the system, and then it talks about the risk assessment. For the risk assessment, it comes with the risk identification, how to analyze the risk, how to evaluate the risk, how to group the risk together, or breaking down into a different section, and then how to treat the risk, how to manage the risk, and then the risk management will be monitored and reviewed and update, and of course, very importantly is the recording and reporting. Okay. We have to document the risk, and come up with the risk register. Okay. This is the information about the ISO 31000, and you are recommended to download this document, to get one document, ISO 31000, because it is the key point for the risk management, and it's a very common topic coming out in the examination. Okay. So far we have quickly gone through 5 PowerPoint within the 2.5 hour time. This is the section part 1A, and then there will be another section, part 1B. For this section, section part 1A, it covers from the study material from chapter 1 to chapter 4, as well as Hong Kong supplementary supplements highlights. And therefore, a lot of information and topics, especially including the SFC, SFO, and also the listing rules. And then for the next section is section 1B, the study covering the study material from chapter 5 to chapter 8, and as well as I will discuss the past paper discussion to help you to understand the examination requirement. Okay. Okay, then that is the end of this session.